Hello, everybody, and welcome to this belated episode of Scriptwriting for Beginners, episode 11. Sadly, football did not come home, and I was away on holiday, which is why it's been 2 weeks missed. However, I thought I'd come back and analyse not only a great short TV series that was on TV recently, but also a script from a writer that I've always been quite intrigued by the genre that he chooses to write in, and I was delighted to see that the BBC Writers' Room had finally released the scripts for Time, starring Stephen Graham and Sean Bean, written by Jimmy McGovern, who also did the documentary Hillsborough, The Accused, etc. And it was a series that was quite hard hitting, and it's obviously a drama. And I was delighted when they released the scripts because I thought his scripts and his writing style gets credited he gets so much accolade for his story arc and his writing. I wanted to know, does he do anything special? Does he write in a style that you think, okay, fair play? When you read a Tarantino script, it's very Tarantino-esque. I was really curious to know what Jimmy McGovern's writing style visually looked like. I mean, regardless of the actual story arc and etc. etc. Fundamentally, I wanted to know: does it look any different to what we write, what the amateurs write? And I'm delighted to say no, it doesn't. And that's no disrespect to his writing, because obviously he writes fantastic work. But what I'm trying to get at is it's so encouraging to know that as an amateur writer, you don't have to write in weird and wacky ways for it to get noticed. Fundamentally, you have to work on your story and what your themes and character arcs and all that stuff internally, which is what makes a good script. Of course, the layout and the look of it can help, but it doesn't have to break any new rules, and which is why I was delighted that the BBC finally released the scripts for it, because I was very curious to know, especially having something set in a prison, which is obviously what Time's about. Sean Bean's character is a guy who isn't your average sort of inmate appearance. He gets sent to prison for drunk driving, and it's about his experience in prison, dealing with guys who are a bit more hostile, and him learning the ropes whilst in prison. And it has the Stephen Graham character arc about a high-ranking prisoner, a prison guard, who kind of gets blackmailed as such, or gets kind of peer pressured, bullied into supplying the inmates with drugs and weapons in order to save his son. So you've got these two characters either side of the literal prison fence, and their roles reverse. Like, Sean Bean is a prisoner, but kind of has a sense of redemption towards the end, bearing in mind it's only 3 episodes long. And then Stephen Graham's character, who starts off morally higher up than Sean Bean because he didn't drink drive, becomes kind of you feel sad for him. Of course, he's not a villain in that sense, but he then does the taboo thing by supplying drugs for the inmates to save his own son. So it's a worthwhile cause why he's doing it, but his actual actions can endanger the other people he's worked with. So it's a selfish act, but for the right reasons. And that's what I'm saying about how complicated and complex his writing internally is. But yet fundamentally, looking at it just simply on the page, you think, oh no, fair play, it looks exactly how the amateurs writers write. And I was fascinated to know how you write a prison-based drama, because there's been a lot of TV and films that are set in prisons, and I kind of wanted to know, well, how do you describe the look of a prison, and especially, let's say, if it's based on real life, how do you avoid it being cliche, but then yet you need the cliches in order for it to sound like an authentic prison? Of course, the stuff that goes on in prisons has to be included because that's what prison life is like. But then how do you write that in a way that people don't go, okay, well, this is just the classic shower scene or the classic beating up scene and the classic scenes. And yet, amazingly, Jimmy McGovern includes all of these scenes in a way that it's just authentic, and you don't think, oh, here we go, I saw that coming. You might, you see it coming, but you almost feel like, well, yeah, it's so real. I don't know whether or not that's because you see it through the eyes of Sean Bean per se, which he is our way in, because we are in the shoes of this person who doesn't fit prison, which majority of us watching it don't. You don't watch it from a gangster's point of view, or someone who enjoys prison, or someone who's been in and out, and someone who's been kind of changed by prison. The change comes later on, but when we first meet him, you're in his shoes. So having a look at page 1, and as I say, thank you very much to the BBC Writers' Room. A moving sweatbox. Now, sweatbox straight away is, I'm guessing, the slang word for the prison van. Now, he could have said moving prison van, and everyone would know know what you were trying to say. But I think by having the word sweatbox, it shows that he's done his research, if you know what I mean, and on what prisoners would call a prison van, and is there a certain slang word that they then just, like prison guards are normally called screws, and when you're writing, and this is from personal experience and what I've heard other people say, when you're writing a script that's specific to an area, use the slang that the locals would use whilst in your dialogue, but also don't be afraid to write it in your actions. You might be afraid that people won't know what you're on about, in which case do this, just to make sure that people know what you're on about. But when you use the word sweatbox, it shows us that, well, this writer has clearly done research on other names for the prison van, and it gives it a sense of authenticity right from the off, and no one's even spoken yet. He's got the radio on full blast. We find Mark Cobden. I found this very, very, very interesting, personally. Bearing in mind it's Sean Bean who was cast. Now, I don't know whether or not Sean Bean was in mind when Jimmy was writing this, and how, at what time the casting was done. But there's not a lot of description about Mark. It just says 50s. Now, I assume, Sean Bean's probably early to late 50s. It doesn't describe his hair, doesn't describe his height. But I think it works because 50s is, and to keep his description plain and kind of boring, shows you that this guy, again, doesn't fit the prison mold. If you was to say Mark Cobden, large, tattooed arm, chubby, shaved head, stereotypically, you're going to think, okay, is this guy a bit more of an experienced prisoner? Is he kind of going back to somewhere that he's already been released from? But to have it just a very plain and simple character description almost plays into this, fish out of water type of character. He's just sitting there still, lost in thought. Not only lost in thought, but lost physically. He doesn't. It obviously deserves to be there in terms of his crime, but he doesn't fit there. Meanwhile, simultaneous to the above, Jono, Stevie and Baz, all in their 20s, in their own individual cubicles, are shouting to each other. Now, again, when we watched this on TV, you didn't actually even get to see their faces, you just heard voices. But include their age for when they make a later appearance in the script, in which they do, but also their age can relate to how they speak and what they're speaking about. And again, Mark's in his 50s, and yet he's sharing this prison van with guys in their 20s. Who's got more to lose? Guys who go into prison in their 20s, guys who go into prison in their 50s. These guys, even though they're younger, seem more experienced because they're shouting. Mark Cobden, even though he's 50 and he's kind of like the older guy, he feels a lot more lost because he's not shouting. How do you explain it, Baz? How do you explain us getting 6 and you getting 3? I can't. Explain that. Shall I tell you? Yeah, what? You tell me. I think I know what to say, but tell me. You're right. You did a deal, mate. I didn't. You did a deal behind our backs, mate, and that explains how they found the stash and buried it. You told them it was there. I didn't. I didn't. This just shows, this is a payoff that eventually happens later on in the script. It just shows you prison, the brutality of prison, and it also gives you a tiny bit of background information to the characters that Mark Cobden's going to have to interact with. I didn't. You did, you prick. Well, no one who knew it was them. I didn't tell them, Steve. You didn't tell them that leaves you, you prick. Meanwhile, to above Pete, I've in 20s is banging his against you. Door. Open this, boy. I need a slash. Brilliant. Different types of way of speaking. Pete isn't a part of this conversation, and yet he's just another one of his prisoners who hates being in. Back to Mark Cobden. John switches to abusing Pete. Now he then drags him into the conversation, which then leads on. Sweatbox speeding along. Back to the... can't pronounce the word. This shows you, it's an interesting way of writing script dialogue. You have characters speaking simultaneously at the same time, which is why they're side by side. It just means they're overlapping one another, it's chaos and it's noise upon noise upon noise. Brings his head forward so that his forehead presses against the wall in front of him. It's just it's a sense of, I give up, I'm so effed here, wallop. Puts his head against the wall and just breathe, a heavy sigh almost. Cragmore Prison, night 1. The main gates to the prison open and the sweatbox goes through him. Now, interestingly enough, these are the sort of transition scenes that I find quite interesting, because you could just have it, the main gates to the prison open, so we know that the prison van's entering prison rather than leaving prison, and it could then jump straight to the sweatbox inside. And welcome to Cragmore. But because we know by that transition, we know that the prison van has dropped the prisoners off, and then the dialogue followed would tell us if it's their first day or they're returning from a court hearing or whatever. But I think by having this included and the huge gate shut behind it, it's like a bam. It's the end of Mark's life as a civilian. If you didn't have it, it seems to be flowing. The prison van drives through. His door opens. He walks into prison. But having this, a sweatbox enter the prison grounds and a huge gate shut behind it. Boom. You can imagine it just going fade, blackout, and then the storyline almost starts up again. So I think if you look at here, the huge gates shut behind it, but then what happens next? The doors to the Mark's cubicle opens. So in one moment things shut, and in another moment they open. What shuts? Well, Mark's former life shuts. What then opens? Mark's new life, because a prisoner opens the door. Welcome to Cragmore. Moves along to the next cubicle. I was surprised that the episodes included things like this, because it actually physically appeared on the screen. And I remember hearing a podcast the other day with Jimmy McGovern speaking, and he did say that showing time progressing in a script, be it television or film or whatever, or theatre, can be very, very tricky, because depending on how much time has passed, you can do physical changes to characters. Maybe a character loses hair, goes grey, one character dies, showing it's been a long time, or gets an illness. But then how do you that's physically showing it, and you then can mentally show it with characters becoming more savvy to their environment. But there's other ways that visually this whole show don't tell, which is obviously what by having a character physically change, it's showing. You don't have a character go, this is my first day here, but we kind of know it is already because it's Welcome to Cragmore, which is allowed because it's the first day. But how would you show Mark Cobden's first day as opposed to his 50th day? Well, you could have him writing on a calendar, you could have him listening to the radio, which announces the date, it's today's Saturday, the July the 2nd, party time, whatever it would be. And yet Jimmy McGovern kind of does it. It's a show don't tell, because he's just clearly writing it. Mark Cobden, day one, doesn't try any clever tactics, and I think that's what the simplicity of Jimmy McGovern's writing, I think, is why it seems to be so well credited, because he doesn't mess about with trying to come up with ultra clever ways. Again, focus on the storyline. Does it really matter that, you know, we subtly show it's Mark Cobden's first day or his 50th day? No, just state it and move on. And it, you know, even so, it says in the title and the scene heading, you know, it's night one continuous. Mark leaves the vehicle and stands within the prison guards. Mark's point of view: barbed wire everywhere. Mark and other prisoners sitting waiting with Baz. John and Steve stare at Baz. Baz takes a seat, and no sooner does he do this, and John and Steve lunge at him. Prison officers pile in and separate the young men, and that's what I mean about you know, that is following on from the conversation. So a conversation that you think is slightly just, you know, just lads mouthing off to one another, does it play a big part? Well, immediately it does play a part. As soon as they get released into like a holding cell, they're fighting again, shows the brutality of prison. This then develops even further, which kind of also then links into Sean Bean's character about being a snitch. Baz for reception. He has a tissue just to his nose to stop the flow of blood. He is put into VP room. Sorry, I was going to say VIP room, and a vulnerable prisoners room. Again, now I would have no clue what a VP room is. First of all, I just said VIP, which is a completely different kettle of fish. So by having VP room, a vulnerable prisoners room, you're showing you're again showing the reader that you've done your research. You're not just saying he's put into a room. Be specific. Be specific what this room is and what this room is called to the people involved in that kind of industry and in that world. It's called a VP room. Then, for the benefit of the reader who may not know what you're on about, just put it in brackets. And then one thing in this, from here above, is something I really, really like, and it's so small, and yet it's one of these things that my own writing really annoys me, because I just think, I can't have it. But the beauty of now just suddenly realising it, that people like Jimmy McGovern does it, it kind of means that, well, I can go ahead and do it in my scripts. Now, I'll leave you 2 seconds to try and guess what it is I'm talking about. Can you think? Right, so simple. The fact he has 3 he's in a row. It is something that normally drives me up the wall with my own writing. Having words, you can repeat the word, he, and, but for some reason, if they're in a line like they are, visually, it just irks me. Now, I'll tell you the truth, it's irking me now, because you just think, that's kind of unusual to have 3 he's in a row. Could you not try to put a comma to make, to force one further away and stuff? But again, he just doesn't care, because he's writing. He needs to use the word he 3 times. They do sort of say, if you're repeating yourself, try to use a different word that can be replaced and stand in for another one of your words. But if you can't, then just put the word in that you've been using. And if it happens to line up with the same word that you've already got above it, so be it. I think as long as it doesn't read like and, which is in my previous episode, we discussed about how to get rid of the word and, then I think just go for it. You can spend a long time writing stuff and trying to play around and try to be fiddly with the very specific, with the specific way that scripts look. And fundamentally, yes, it does matter, but if the storyline and everything included within that, characters, etc., are poor, then you writing 3 he's in a row isn't going to make any bloody difference. Right, so anyway, he. Which sounds like the Joker. Is this the VP room? It's only to keep you away from those two head the balls. Not too sure what that means. Could be colloquial. Now, interestingly here, this character Baz says, "I'm not standing in the VP room. I'm no nonce." Now, because of the nature of the prisoners who go into this vulnerable prisoners room, so a vulnerable prisoners room is prisoners who are not vulnerable to themselves but vulnerable to the other inmates. So typically guys who will be attacked by the other inmates because they're nonces or snitches. So this Baz character says, I don't want to go in this VP room. I'm going to take my chance with them because I'm not having the entire Nick thinking I'm a nonce. So he's used to prison life. He knows the rules. He knows the hard, the rules of surviving in prison. Someone like Mark would go into this VP room thinking, okay, well, I'm safe here, not knowing the consequences of what it could mean within like the prison setup. However, Baz, being he's a bit more of an experienced inmate, knows that he'd rather take his chances and fight these guys, get beaten up hard, because he insulted them, rather than having the entire Nick, again slang word for prison, thinking he's a nonce, because being a nonce is 10 times worse than insulting an inmate by being just angry and being a brute. And then the officer, it's only a temporary measure, it's only for half hour. Right, for half hour. I know you're not a nonce. Okay, half an hour. I'm not going to VP room, you'll put me in a normal wing in a half hour, yeah? Yeah. And Patterson stands the door and locks it. The other men are sort of the holding room. The officer, man in the main desk, Banks, calls out Mark Stanley, and Mark goes to him. You're Mark Cobden, yes. Date of birth, 17th of April 1964. What religion are you, Mark? Haven't really got one. Don't go to church for it. I'll put you down as Anglican, yeah? More lapsed Catholic. Right. Have you been in prison before? No. A first time for everything, isn't there? Yes. Are you suicidal? What? Are you feeling suicidal? Are you contemplating killing yourself? Mark has to think about this for some time. No. Could you look into the camera, please? Now, I don't think here he's actually thinking about wondering to himself, am I feeling suicidal? I just think he's thinking to himself, I've never been asked this question in my life before. There's not many occasions where someone might say, how are you feeling? But it's very blunt. Are you feeling suicidal? Now, no disrespect to the prison officer, Banks, he doesn't really care about Mark's feelings if he is feeling suicidal, but it's just it's format, and it's the formality of, are you feeling suicidal? No. Yes. Tick. Are you contemplating killing yourself? If he said yes, they'd have to say complete different procedure. Because he said no, they follow a different procedure. Again, shows the writer's done his research, and already showing you here that that Mark is kind of in an environment where they don't necessarily care too much about why you're feeling like it. They're more concerned about what you're feeling. So if you happen to say you're suicidal, they don't care why. They just will go, right, you're feeling suicidal, boom, we'll take care of that. Female officer with a checklist. Are you currently on medication? No. Have you ever contracted a sexual transmitted disease? No. Have you ever suffered depression? When I was a bit younger, I might have been. Is that a yes or no? No. Again, Mark doesn't understand the questions. He understands the question fundamentally, have you ever suffered depression? But he doesn't understand the bigger consequences by answering yes or no, which is why when I was a bit younger, I might have been, is that a yes or no? Get to the point, blunt, no. Have you ever suffered from any mental illnesses? No. Do you have any specific dietary requirements? Now, if you've noticed here, there's been quite a heavy emphasis on kind of mental health related questions, and that again plays into all the characters really, especially the ones that Mark meets pretty much straight away in his prison cell. How would you say, is mental health discussed enough in prisons? Is it taken seriously? How is it dealt with? So I think to have such a strong focus on the officers asking Mark questions about his mental health, for it to still be dealt in a kind of a brutal way later on, shows that Jimmy McGovern's, one of his theme is showing you how mental health is how it's handled in prison, and how do inmates handle it. Top off please, arms up please, top back on, underpants down please, that's a squat please. What? Squat. Again, some people would say, Mark hasn't really done much. He just said what, no a few times. But bearing in mind, this guy's just been shoved into prison. He is going to be, again, a fish out of water. Squat. Does that? Pee into here. Mark is sitting waiting. Pete, who we met on the sweat box, is talking to another prisoner. It's 2 years, only 2 years. Our Jin could do you. Don't let them bang you up without telling you. You'll be in the first night, so loads of them don't have telly, so just refuse to work. Refuse to go in because you need a telly, mate. You'll need a telly. Again, shows you that he's more of a pro. Cobden. Again. Now, just not too much. When I said the other day about earlier today about how is a prison scene actually described. Well, keep it basic. A-wing landing, which tells you the location of what this of what particular building this is. Along the first night landing, showing that there's a difference between the permanent landing and the first night landing. I mean, we all know what a landing looks like in prison. It's a landing. It's the cells with a staircase and a walkway. Don't have to necessarily describe that, because again, if you're talking about a prison that is based on real life and hasn't got anything crazy about it, describing it in a professional and precise way is good enough. They're each carrying their bags with their few precious possessions in. Now, interestingly enough, to say they're each carrying bags would be good enough, because you would assume you would know what's inside them, either be it precious possessions or supplies. But say what they're doing. It's a bit like when you say a character's eating. Eating what? Don't be afraid to say eating a sandwich, eating a bacon sandwich, because you can either then somehow factor that into a character trait, a bit of dialogue, or even if that doesn't even happen, it just makes your script seem more believable and real, rather than just saying eating. And don't be too crazy and try to eat in something that not many people eat, unless again that is a character trait. Eating a bacon sandwich is basic. Everyone knows what it looks like, so therefore we go aha. And again, if you're writing something set in prison, they're going to have a certain diet. If you're writing something Downton Abbey-esque, they're going to have a particular diet. That's how you can show that the genre you're writing in and for. You can make a 2-minute phone call from here. Mark here, hearts lift. He picks up the receiver and realises, shit, I haven't got the number. It's in my phone. Who are you going to phone? Parents. You get paper, stamp and envelope tomorrow. You can write to them unless there's another number. The wife's, but she's up to you. Hello. Her voice really gets him. Hello. And then this stands for voiceover. Means she's not in the scene location, but she's but it's still in the present day. It's me. I've got 4 years. I need mum and dad's number. Brilliant bit of exposition showing you that he's not in it for forever. Didn't get a life sentence, but he's in here long enough where it's going to do some damage to himself and to his family. I'll get it. Have you got a pen? It's 01. He writes it on his hand. Can I make another call? Sorry. Could you phone them for me? Can't you do it? No, I'm only allowed one call and this is it. What should I tell them? Tell them in Cragmore. They'll know I've got 4. They were in court for that, but they don't know I'm in Cragmore. Right. How's Tom? Don't go there. Fantastic. Now, what I've mentioned in previous episodes about writing tiny bits of exposition, we know, we assume that this is let me see. Yeah, sorry. So we know that this is the wife because he says the wife. However, when he phones her, it doesn't exactly sound like they're happily married still. I mean, obviously the news of him going sent to prison is going to cause a rift. But Alice isn't exactly loving and sympathetic on the phone to him. So that implies that they might be getting divorced, they're estranged, or whatever it is. Especially the fact that only the parents, so like the nan and granddad, only they attended court. So why didn't Alicia attend court? Again, this is because they've got an estranged relationship. Very, very subtle ways of showing you the family setup here. Especially then ending on how's Tom? Don't go there. Now, we know that Tom has to be the son. It can't be anyone else, because if it was, I don't know, if it was his brother-in-law or his brother, he wouldn't ask her, and why would he really care? So the next person, apart from his wife and his own family, like his own parents, who he'd be concerned about, is a son or a daughter. So therefore, we know how's Tom? Don't go there implies that again they've got an estranged relationship. Tom, who is the son, clearly is going to have even a further strained relationship because of his whole prison thing, and Alicia just doesn't care to talk about it at the current time, which again devastates him. Prison officer leading the 3 prisoners along landing. They get to a cell. This is the first night cell, so cool because you spend your first night in it. Tomorrow will be induction, and after induction you'll be taken to another wing. So this is for one night only. In you go. Again, use characters who are allowed to use exposition, be the people who deliver the exposition. So Mark Cobden can't give any exposition on prison. He can ask something, what is this, what is this, what is this, what is this? The prison officer, give yourself a way out, that if you've got a complicated setup that you want explaining or a situation, there has to be one character who can realistically be allowed to deliver the information that we as the audience want to know, and the character. We as the audience don't really care that this is called the first night cell. I mean, you might then think, well, I wonder why no one else is with him. So the prison officer just explains, because it's the first night cell, it doesn't really make a difference. Again, just shows you that the writer has done his research. Mark enters the cell. Mark looks around, lots of graffiti. This is emergency call button. So cool because you're in an emergency, right? Again, something that later then comes on at a later scene. Right, I knew Bob Warren. Right, he was a good man, I know. Now, this is the only thing that doesn't really come in later. I mean, Bob Warren is basically the guy that Sean Bean accidentally killed drink driving. Now, it just gives you a little bit of he was a good man, meaning that, he was a good man. And the fact is, Mark says, I know, implies, a huge sense of, sympathy and regret. And also a little bit that everyone knows each other's businesses. The prison guards know who's who, and their crime they've been sent for. And the fact is, you've got a prison officer here that knew the guy who Sean Bean killed personally. It's something that doesn't develop. It's not a story thread that relates. If anything, they actually have not an okay relationship. But it just shows you Mark Cobden's sense of regret, and also that he was a good man. And you could also imply that, I think up until this point, we don't know what he was in for. I believe so. So by saying I knew Mark Cobden, I knew Bob Warren, it implies, obviously, I knew, past tense, meaning Bob Warren's dead. Saying it to Sean Bean would imply that Sean Bean was the one who's responsible for something going wrong with Bob Warren. So it gives you a tiny bit of implication of what Sean Bean's character might be in for. And the fact is, he says, I know, implies that he's instantly feels regret. Officer slams the cell door shut. Mark's lying on his bunk, listening to people shouting at each other in their cells. Stevie voiceover, come in with Jono, I've got 6 as well, what about you? 4 years, Cat 1 receiving, that just leaves you. Again, prison slang, and it's people who know it. Basically is different levels of severity of a prisoner inmate. Sometimes they're Cat A, Cat B, Cat C rather than numbers, but I'm assuming Cat A is Cat 1, so it's quite higher. Means you're a bit more restricted to what you can and can't do. Mark doesn't realise he's being spoken to. Hey, Mark, isn't it? Yeah. Man in his 50s, yeah? Yeah, what are you in for? Mark can't answer that. Are you a nonce? Brilliant. No, not that, sorry. Sounds bad. Are you a nonce? Brilliant line, because, again, this is a whole thing about, not wanting to be labelled something that you aren't, which is why Mark realised he has to answer, I killed a man. So, and he did kill a man, whether it be accidentally or deliberately, but he wanted to just say, I killed a man. He was happy to not answer, because I guess the fact is the whole, this thing that develops is Sean Bean trying to come to terms with what he's done and this redemption. He was quite happy not to say what he's done, and kept it quite short and sweet here. I think maybe he felt like the less he talks about it, the less it can kind of affect him. But he's kind of given an ultimatum, if you don't say what you're in for, you're going to be called a nonce. Are you a nonce? Mark realises he has to answer, I killed a man. And then we go into Stephen Graham's character, Eric, which I probably will do for the next episode, because I thoroughly enjoyed reading through this. I mean, you can see how 11 minutes in, and we've established, Sean Bean arrived in prison as a fish out of water. He's, the quick but brutal experiences he has with the inmates beating one another up as soon as they're released from the sweatbox, and this whole thing about making sure you can survive prison in the early stages by not being labelled a nonce, which is why then he says he killed a man, something that he's trying to hide, whether it be because he's ashamed. You then got added into that mixture of slang, research, sweatbox, professional words. You then got the theme of mental health being discussed, depressed, and how does that play into Sean Bean's character? Does he get depressed over it? And all of this plays a part in 11 minutes. So as I say, for next week's episode, I'm definitely going to be looking into the next segment, which is focused on Stephen Graham's character, and just to show you the slight difference in, I guess, the way that the prison guard is portrayed, and how his life can, Sean Bean's life now starts off shit, whereas Stephen Graham's life starts off pretty average, pretty okay-ish, and yet later on in the whole storyline they completely overlap one another and turn into each other's storyline to a certain degree, without giving any spoilers away if you haven't already seen it. So thank you very much for watching this video. It's been one of my favourite ones so far. Please like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, and please share this tweet around if you've enjoyed the seminar, as I like to call them. Thank you very much.